and get started. So, thinking about what you've done so far, what you've done like with your games, with your projects, what's one of the main things that's missing? I sort of hinted at it as I was just singing up at the front here. Leaderboards, things like that. What happens like when you refresh your page? So after you like beat the game, you beat one of your games and you have a score, when you refresh your page, it just disappears, right? There's no saving your data. There's no saving your game. So we're gonna start learning how to do that. Not specifically on your games or anything. We're gonna learn how to like work with a database. So the next couple weeks for this unit, it's gonna be learning Ruby and then eventually learning Rails. So Rails is gonna be working in the back end. So saving data and then learning how to call that data and rendering it on your browser. So today we're going to learn really basic database work. So we're going to run through kind of how to model your database. So what your data should look like just in terms of like a relational standpoint. So what parts of your data relate to what. Then we're going to get into actual SQL. So we're going to build a database. We're going to use SQL, which is structured query language, to actually like play around with some data for a little bit. And then we're going to kind of go through basic SQL syntax and then do a little bit more advanced stuff, just like with joins if we have time. Do you have a question? No? No? Cool. All right. So I slacked out the lesson plan. There are 3 different files or 3 different lesson plans that we're actually going to be using. So if you open up the lesson plan that I slacked out, you'll see links to all 3 of them. There's domain modeling, basics of databases, and relationships. So first things first is we're going to go into our domain modeling. So the idea of domain modeling is data, when you're working with like your programs right now, right? We kind of think of it as nouns and verbs, right? So your verbs are your functions, things that are actually, that you're doing to your program. Nouns are things like variables or objects, things that you want to manipulate using those functions, right? So nouns are something that you would actually be saving, things that you would manipulate and then eventually save that change. The verbs, the functions, are things that are already saved in your script file and you can use at any point in time. So the idea of domain modeling is to take essentially those nouns and model it out in a visual way to see how they relate to one another, right? So the idea is we look at the attributes of our data, not the behavior of our program. So a domain model would be used to show the entities. So essentially sort of if you think of a data structure or like a database, you have different tables, which we'll get into in a little bit. So an entity is essentially a single table, and then you can link each of those tables based on their relationship between each other, right? So let's just get into what an ERD looks like. So when we think of domain modeling, that's kind of the idea of building those relationships and understanding those relationships. The ERD is basically a tool to then visualize that relationship. It looks sort of like a tree of boxes coming down, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. So we want to look at not only the entities, but then the attributes that each of those entities have. So if we look in here, we look at our orchard. So this is just a little example. It's kind of nothing that you're going to be working with here, but this is like an orchard company, right? So a company that owns a bunch of orchards. And our ERD is the diagram of how the data would relate to each other, but also be separated, right? So each of these are related in some degree, but they're all confined to a given section. So they each have kind of their own table, as it were, right? So right now, this ERD describes like the different relationships that this data would have, or these tables or these entities would have with each other. The way that we like to think about it is these little arrows here. An arrow, this part of the arrow, kind of the head of the arrow, means like a many relationship. The point of the arrow, or the butt of an arrow, I don't really know what you call it, the beginning of the arrow here, right? Yeah, or like the feather of the arrow, even though there are no feathers maybe. Sure, let's go with that. That kind of defines a single relationship, right? So basically you have one company. There aren't multiple companies, there's one company. But one company can own many orchards, right? One orchard here, you see there's one. One orchard would have many trees, if we're thinking of like an apple orchard or something. one orchard would have one stand. So here there is no point of the arrow. This is literally two feather sides, or whatever. So we have an orchard, and it has one stand where it sells. And then we have our picking robots, which is kind of a weird example because I don't know how many robots there are. But we have a picking robot, or many picking robots. So an orchard can have many picking robots, but let's say the orchard is out of season. Those picking robots can then be moved to another orchard that is in season. So instead of apples, they're picking, what's another like fruit that doesn't, peaches, oranges? Yeah, any of those that aren't in the same season as apples. So apples are out of season, so the picking robot moves to another orchard that picks peaches and oranges at the same time. Which one?
Cherries.
Cherries, yeah. Do those grow on trees? I think those grow in bushes.
Is that trees?
That's true. That's fair. I'm okay with that. Yeah, cool.
Trees.
Huh? Trees? All right, cool. I had no idea. Good to know. Learn something new every day. Yeah, so this is our basic ERD here. Yeah, question?
Does the thing that allows the picking robot to move to another orchard, the feather next tied to the orchard? Arrow at the end of the orchard? Like, is that how you
So
do
like
that?
this?
Yeah.
So this is basically, so there's not really a lot, kind of. Yeah, so basically what it's saying is that an orchard would have many robots, but these robots can go to many orchards, right? So the idea is you think of this, even though this right now is one orchard here, think of it as like there are multiple copies of this same diagram happening, where this company is one, right? But then there are a bunch of orchards, and all of those orchards have a stand, and they have a bunch of trees, and they have a bunch of robots, right? So those robots can go in between. So you would think about it, marker. So literally off of this page, you'd see another orchard here, right? So this is orchard 2. Orchard? Let's go with that. So this would be orchard 2, and you would literally have another arrow going like that, right, to connect to your picking robots. So they can basically interchange between these two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more so.
Cool, awesome. Matt, do you have a question?
Yes, so are each of these entities like in the scope of a larger scope, or is it like each of them approaches their own scope? So like company, like the name and the profit on thing is in the scope of the company. And then
So like, oh, this? Yeah, kind of, yeah. So we'll get into that in a little bit. The idea is that, yes, this is within the scope of the company. But the best part about relational databases, which we'll get into a little later, is that you can link these two together. So if you wanted to like play with your orchard data, you could then pull in, this orchard is a part of this name company, and like pull those two together and actually link them. We'll get into that in a little bit though. Any other questions on ERDs? Because you guys are now going to do one. We're going to jump right into it. So think of a library, right? Just think of one library. So I know like, you know, there's like public libraries, you have like the state and then all the public libraries within the state. Let's not get too out of control here. Think of one library and think of basically pieces in that library that would be considered separate entities. So as an example, I'll just give books. Libraries have books, right? So I'm gonna have you guys group up. Let's just do it, each table groups up and draw it. Let's try, actually, let's do, how many people do we have here? Like 20 or so? More than 20? Let's do like 2 tables each, and you guys pick a spot on the wall and just draw out an ERD that you would think of for a library. So your library would be kind of your company, right? And then what flows from there? What library, does a library have many books? Yeah. So you would probably have like a single library with many books. And then build it out from there. Just try to think about some other examples. So I'm going to say your 2 tables together, these 2 back tables, these 2 back tables, and these 2 back tables. You guys all like pick a corner of the room and let's draw some ERDs. There you go. There you go. So you guys, this table pair together.
Let's do ERD for general assembly coordinates.
This might be an awkward spot. You guys want to use like that table or that wall Or use it. You can use it here. I don't care. That's fine.
Doesn't matter.
Let's go
You
for it.
guys can loop around this way if you want to get on
I'm
like
gonna get out
both.
of your way then.
All right.
So I guess is the library like the equivalent of a company?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And then-
Node or object in the domain, in the orchard domain.
Yep. Exactly.
Like this. And then we wanted to start with books.
So as you guys are building it, think about adding in some of the attributes in that library. So you see on the company, there's the founded on date and the name,
But
right?
would it
So
be
try to add in some
books
attributes.
because
So
there's
then
so many
library.
different aspects to a library?
But then can't we have like
Yeah, like
fiction?
Because I didn't know if
Like
like
subject
orchard would be
would be like
location.
subjects.
No, just not usually. Just in genres actually.
What?
Genres.
Okay.
Wait, put in what?
Genres.
I think you're jumping the gun. We have to like go from the library. I was
Is
thinking
that
like
an
the
arrow
branch, the actual
and then
physical
this
library.
is-
I was thinking physical library would be like the orchard is like
It
the.
should just be like category of books.
Let's do it basic.
I think it would just be books with like bullet points, like fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, that's what I was
But they have more than books, guys.
I know, so then you have a magazines or whatever here, like
That's like the company.
bank over at yonder.
Why not, instead of library going straight to books, why not have like the physical,
Location.
like
that
branch
branch.
1, branch 2, branch
You'd
3,
be referencing
you know?
fiction.
We're already in a branch, right?
Yeah, it would be the
Wait,
branch.
okay,
of the physical
everyone
library.
slow down because you're all talking and
Okay.
saying different things.
Because I'm saying that you have a name of each book, and pretty much the name of each book would have a genre. So you're literally splitting it up between each one.
If you look at the way they do it, they do company and then they do the physical location, which is the orchard. So I would do like a physical location and then do one branch that would do books and things like that, and then the other aspects they do off the physical location.
But that orchard is not really a physical location.
Yeah.
It's just an orchard that the company owns. You know what I'm
But
saying?
like you guys are focusing just on books and they do so much more. That would be just one, like it would be one whole branch, not things branched mainly off
We've
that.
got the library, we've got the books.
Or maybe
and there
like
are
from
a
library
gazillion
goes to
different
services.
kinds of books.
Genres and
So
sections.
from books, I think
If you guys want to think about something instead of books, even what else does a library have, right? So think about like what other things other than books do they have, or who else is in a library? Maybe like patrons. Or something.
I mean, there's computers.
There's magazines, there's
So where do you guys get to?
study room, library.
So
They have
what else?
I need you guys to direct me. Are these solid? Or and these
Yeah,
are
so
arrows?
that's
But like, so in the orchard, they don't have a location screen. Like, where you're talking about moving the branches off. Because the orchard has a location as like an attribute, but not like a separate thing. Right?
Magazines.
So it doesn't
they
matter
have
if they.
continuing education, like they have like rooms where you can
yeah.
Are these circles?
I think these
Don't worry about that.
Is this
The
closed?
part is just basically
I think once we get to books we just bullet point it like
so the idea.
But is it like there's like solid bullets and
Yeah, I don't know what his definition was of that again.
but like okay, yeah, you're right.
so is this
Yeah, that would make sense.
and then it's solid too?
That's you can write that in there. That would be an attribute of that. Something that's
Right.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah.
And then from computer we could bullet it down to like
Homeless guy. What else is person watching YouTube.
So try not to get too stuck in like the attributes right now, right? Think about what else the library has. So you guys have classes here. Yeah. So what else does GA has? It's like right.
any input?
So we could say like internet services
Yeah.
and
Printing.
and printing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll do a printer.
I feel like that's more of an attribute than like of a computer rather than
That's fair. That would be so. I would probably say those would be like a linking thing, right? So
You mean like
structures can move around.
just like
Like this is like
Yeah.
just like maybe internet.
like printer and like that.
I think printers separate.
Yeah, I was just separate. That is an oath
Exactly.
function. Has to be.
just say printing services and then call it a day.
Would printing services be like a computer as well?
Yeah.
Like not connected to
You
the
can just call
computer?
it computer bank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
printing
this is
something
like-
different.
We're splitting
Yeah.
hairs here.
Yeah, because you just go up to the service desk and ask them to print something.
Well,
So should printer be like
Well, no, because when you go to the computer, there's at my library there's a printer like that's connected to those computers. You can print right there. You just pay. Like you have
If you have-
yeah.
So classes here, if this were like your classes,
I
right?
don't know. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you can only
I
print
gotta
from
go
a
look.
computer.
So,
And then like
Yeah.
you have another entity that would be like course or something like that. And then it would have like a class ID.
they also go to the computer because that itself has a catalog. It's a catalog source.
From the computer?
Yeah, now like nowadays, the computer is the catalog. You don't have like a physical thing.
So can you just add that under internet? Like catalog?
Oh, under here?
Yeah,
If you
it's
don't
not
know
like
what
you
the
have
book
like
is,
a
it's
trunk
your
and then
first stop.
No, it couldn't branch out specifically from here. Yeah, you could have like orchard and then you could have like
They have audio stuff.
Fiction and non-fiction stuff and attributes underneath the books. That's what I wanted to
Yeah, that's attribute.
Onion books?
Yeah, that's what you have. I think, or like, that is like genre and like authors and like subjects.
Under here.
Yeah, within books.
yeah, I would actually want to support that too. I would say like students would be here, students would be its own thing as well, and instructors would be their own thing, and then they all link together.
Oh, okay.
Because I think they're more like attributes like amending from books as opposed to like additional nodes or domains. Yeah, I think it's authors put in like
I don't know, fiction and non-fiction run together.
yeah.
I guess feeling looks good.
A lot of different views.
Well, for me, I feel like
What?
we
They
should
should be described.
this one
Very
now
nice handwriting.
branch out genres, and then we're gonna have a genre in there, and then we call it referencing genres.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I think I remember my class struggled with that a lot. We had half the people put genres in their own and half the people put genres in books.
Well, you're gonna reference genres from the books anyway, so you
Yeah.
might reference it.
So my thought process is that a book can have more than one genre, right? So I would typically put genres in their own entity, just because then you can have books have many genres, and genres are also linked to many books as well. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's not necessarily a right or wrong answer there, but that's just how I think about it at least. So yeah, but
Well, whatever I think.
feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
So maybe then for books, we could just have like author in there. And then have genres be their own thing.
I could probably get those and say, well, like, you know, you go pick up books from there, so
Because then
if not that location or whatever.
magazines would be going to kind of genres too, in a way. So what you have, like books and magazines going to genres.
So what am I doing with nonfiction? I'm just doing genres, and then within genres, there's a gazillion different types of things.
There you go.
There I go.
Yeah.
Oh, nonfiction, fiction. So how are you depicting nonfiction, fiction, and that kind of stuff? What kind of a property would you have that does that?
We're doing genres.
There, she's working on
here.
it. All right.
And then you want this to look.
Yeah, it's also linked to genres.
Alright, but you gotta tell me, am I doing arrows or bullets or what? So look at that.
Wouldn't it be like arrows?
Circle and this would be an arrow. Open circle.
What are these
Yeah, it feels
We don't get in that very much, but that's saying each orchard can have 0, 1, or
No, I don't think that we have it on, but like they also have DVDs and music, movies and stuff nowadays too. But
That's where they
voting,
would sell things out of the orchard.
voting.
that's where you go to vote. That's all I know. It's the only time we go.
There might not be a stand. If there is a stand, there's only going to be one stand per orchard.
Seems weird, right?
Well, yeah, because we're religion. Because it's like there's no religion. You're supposed to not be any religion in state.
What's the I can write that down.
I guess
Oh, yeah, what was the
losses
drama?
There has to be at least one tree.
That'd be hilarious, though, huh? Well, the women aren't allowed to go. The women aren't allowed to go. They have to go
Well, I just feel like
downstairs.
we don't really
They
need
have
that.
vegetarian.
Sure. Yeah.
Versus as many.
Okay. Sure. That's fair.
I'm not even
Sure.
Let's get your point.
Sure.
I'm not.
No, no, no.
All right, guys. Let's all get back to our seats. Ooh, dead silence. Whoa. That was impressive. All right. So, what questions do people have there? That's not as easy as it seems, is it? There's a lot of thought process that goes behind that. A lot of thinking. It's pretty tough, right? Yeah. Was that? Yeah, done it before. Cool. Awesome. So, what kind of questions do you guys have on this? There's a lot to learn with this, and it really, for a lot of these, there's no specific right answer necessarily, right? So it is a little bit up to you, depending on how you want to separate your tables. Does anybody want to like bring up theirs as an example and talk through it at all? No. Matt, you want to go?
So for our logical way of thinking, we broke it down and says, top, we got the library, and from the library we have books, media, we didn't get into the common book, they have that.
Mm-hmm.
Homies is like the people. So, we know they have a name for the library location. From that, every library has books, so we can kind of get like a reference number of like the actual specific book.
Mhm.
Because like a lot of us have that similar name, so it would be a more direct path to get to the conclusion you want versus reference that and author name in the published year. From that, we'll go down into sections, so like nonfiction, fiction, and all that stuff. Genres, just like from books as well. We basically like, I guess, categorize books by the nonfiction, or we can do it by genre, so horror, romance, action. Media will be like computers, like nowadays, libraries are like incorporating a lot of the new tech, so they have like computer labs, people that go in there and browse. Microfiche, DVDs, newspapers, magazines, other things that will be in other media as part.
So what, when you guys are thinking about it, what was the thought process behind doing for books to genres, right? So you have one book has many genres, but do you think a genre can have many books? Yeah. So maybe that would be like an arrow going upwards as well, right?
Yeah, we were kind of confused with like how to position the arrow.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So basically, like, you want to think about many-to-many relationships, what we call it. So many genres, many books, many genres, right? Or one-to-many. So one library has many books, right? I guess in theory for libraries, you can kind of pass books around between libraries, but that's why we're only thinking about one. But yeah, no, that looks great. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions on this one or any theirs at all? You guys will have a lot of practice with ERDs. This is something that you're going to be looking to do for your projects and stuff going forward. So don't worry if it's not like immediately clear right now. We'll get into it a little bit more. So Matt was telling me that we should probably talk about these little circles, which is fair. I agree. So we don't really use them a ton, but you will see them at different times, and they're pretty important for ERDs. Basically, the idea is the filled-in circle is like a necessity, right? So an orchard needs trees to exist, right? You can't have an orchard without trees because that's the point of an orchard. An orchard does not technically need a stand, right? So an orchard could just be like a, whatever it is, like a mass-producing orchard or something that just ships all its stuff to grocery stores maybe. So it doesn't technically need a stand. So that's what the open circle is. It's saying it's not 100% necessary, whereas the trees are completely necessary to have an orchard. Is that fair, Matt?
Yeah, one way I look at it is like a 0 or a 1. You can see that an orchard could have 0 stands, and if it does have any, it only has 1 stand. Whereas an orchard has to have at least 1 tree, and it might have many trees. That's another way of looking at it and translating it. Whereas an orchard might not have a picking robot, but if it does, it's going to have one or more picking robots. So you can see it that way too.
Cool.
Both are the same idea.
Cool, thanks. Any questions? Yeah,
So, sorry.
that's all right.
The arrow pointing down toward means it can have many.
Yeah, so basically the arrow going in either direction means many, right? So an orchard has many robots, and a robot has many orchards, right? Any other questions before we move on?
And why does this stand have the filled-in circle?
So it's saying, what is it? So basically it's saying like, if the orchard does have a stand, then why is the circle? Then there has to be at least one, right? Yeah. Okay.
There's not going to be many stands for that orchard.
Yeah. Right. There's just one.
There's only 1 stand to sell the fruits and vegetables from.
Yep.
But it has to have
So 0 or 1.
So it doesn't have to. So the idea, the open circle here means it doesn't have to have one.
But the stand has to have.
The stand has to have an orchard. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Cool. So we're going to stop on ERDs for right now, and we're going to move into databases specifically. Does that sound cool with everyone? So if you go back to the original lesson plan, there's another link to basics of databases in SQL. If you want to open that up or not. So that answers my questions. So databases, can someone tell me like, what's the use for a database besides just saving our game scores? What are some good parts about a database? What's like exciting about them?
Be able to retrieve it.
Yeah, be able to retrieve the data. Yep. Kim?
Being able to order your data.
Be able to what?
Order the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, you have one?
Being able to mass produce like a lot of things and put it inside of the database.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. Anything else?
Store clients or users information.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Craig, were you raising your hand or just chilling?
Analyze the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Analyze the data. Yeah. One more?
I guess the one I was thinking at first was like being able to use the data to connect it to your to another like production product, so like a website or.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. For sure. Yeah, and that's what we're going to be doing a lot in the next few weeks. Absolutely. Yeah, so a database is really, you can store data when you're like working in web development. You can store data in a lot of places, right? You could actually store data on a normal text file. It's not good, it's not easy, and it's going to make things really slow, but it is possible. A database will make things a lot easier, and importantly, it will make it a lot faster, and even more importantly, it'll make it a lot very consistent. When you're writing things into a text file, there's really no constraints around what you're putting in there, right? You can just dump a bunch of stuff in there, and it makes it real hard to figure it out, right? So think of it, if you guys remember, like the minified version of jQuery or something was just like a jumbled mess, right? It would kind of look a little bit like that if you start just dumping a bunch of things into a text file. If you have like Facebook, if Facebook saved all of their data on a text file, that would be a disaster. That's billions and billions, more than that. I don't know what the word is for like 50 million times that, but very hard, ton of data that you'd be throwing into a text file for Facebook. That's obviously not a good idea. So we use databases. As it says here, scalability is also really important, right? So they can handle a lot more than something like a text file. You can store a lot more in there, and it makes it a lot faster. And then as, I forget who was saying it, but querying the data, I think Kim, you were saying it, right? Like you can sort, You can search for data. You can do all sorts of things through that database much easier than you would using something like a text file or anything like that. So for this unit, we're going to be using what we call a relational database. You guys will get into in week 8 or 9, I think. You guys get into what we call Mongo, which is a non-relational database. So instead of tables, we have what we call documents. Don't worry about that for now. For today and for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about relational databases. So what those are is it's basically like a collection. You can think of it as a collection of like Excel tables or something, except in a much faster, consistent, smart place to put them, right? So the idea of your database now, your relational database, is that you'll essentially have tables with columns and rows, right? And you'll have multiple ones. So one example would be something like singers and artists, or songs and artists, right? So you'd have songs and artists, right? So a song would have something like your ID, right? And then it would have title, length. What's something else a song would have that's not an artist? Actually, no. So it would be title and length, and then we'll have something called artist ID, which I'll get into in just a second. Right? So your artist will also have an ID, a name, let's say nationality, which I'm not going to spell all the way, and date of birth. Right? So these are two separate tables. Or, as we looked at our ERDs, they're two separate entities, right? So basically, the idea of a relational database is that these two tables can communicate with each other. When you create a song, you add something called an artist ID, right? And so that allows you to link it. So that artist ID would be the same as your ID here. So let's say we have Kanye, who's artist ID number 1, right? And then let's say we have Drizzy. All right, fine. All right, he's number 2, right? So now we have song 1, song 2, song 3. So let's go with Monster. Oh boy, this is tough. Huh? Oh yeah. All right. I'm gonna put that actually number 1. Hotline Bling. Monster. Let me get one more from one of these two guys. Huh? Wait, what? Oh, alright. Alright, there we go. So as we go through here, Hotline Bling will have artist ID 2, right? Monster will have artist ID 1. And so you can link these like so, right? And so as you're querying for this data, right, you can then say, give me all the songs with artist 2, and then provide who that artist's name is, right? So then you would have a list here that says Hotline Bling, Drake. Right? Does that all make sense? Cool. So this is what we call a relational database. When you get into non-relational databases, it's a little bit more complicated in a sense, but there's still sort of a similar aspect to it. But this makes it really easy to basically combine tables and really be able to call data from one table to another. And again, we'll get into actual specific work with that in a couple minutes. So just to go through one more thing before we really get into our actual database is a little bit of terminology stuff. So you hear the term database a lot, right? And you'll hear the term database management system. So our databases is this. Our databases are the actual sets of data that we're storing in some given space, right? Our database management system is the software that we actually use to work with that data. So in this case, we're going to be using Postgres, right? Or when we get into non-relational, as I mentioned before, we'll be using Mongo. So our database CLIs are things that we will get into in literally 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes in fact, which is like pSQL. So pSQL is something that you'd use in your command line to actually play around with the data instead of having to go into like your SQL database and really like mess around in like another application for it. And then lastly, as I said before, are NoSQL databases. So that's similar to our non-relational databases. So that's something like MongoDB. So is everyone ready to actually like start building some stuff? Cool, awesome. So we're going to go into Postgres. I'm pretty sure everyone downloaded Postgres during InstallFest. Is that right? Cool, awesome. So I'm going to go through this. If you guys want to follow along, you can. But we're going to get into like a real exercise pretty soon after this. So if you want to just watch, you're welcome to. So first things first, I suspect most of you guys don't actually have Postgres running right now. So if you do command space and actually search for Postgres, I already have mine running, but you should see, not that, you should see like a little box that pops up with Postgres, right? Is that people seeing that? No? If you search for Postgres?
The elephant?
Yeah, the elephant. Yep, search the elephant. If it's not coming up, hold off for a second. When we get in the exercise, we can help you download it. It probably just means that it hasn't been downloaded yet. So, so the idea here, I kind of haven't mentioned this yet, but we're going to get into a lot of like SQL code right now, and it's going to look new. It's going to look different than anything you guys have done so far, and we're going to do some exercises with it. The idea of this right now is to kind of just give you an introduction into what it looks like, right? We want to get you like a little bit comfortable with the basics of it, but after this day, you're really not actually going to be coding with SQL at any point in time, right? Unless you somehow become like a database manager somewhere or something like that, right? But as a developer, you're really not going to be using SQL, raw SQL code at any point in time, right? But when you're working with things like Rails, you're going to see it a lot. It's going to come up a lot. You're going to see it happening in your terminal as you run what we call a server, right? Anytime you make a call to your backend, you're going to see a bunch of SQL code loop through because it's searching for certain things. Again, it's not something that you're going to need to know explicitly, but it might help you at some point figure out errors and be able to actually understand what might be going wrong or right with your code, right? So the idea right now is to be able to read it, but if at any point in time you want to write it, it's something that, not surprisingly, you can Google in the future. But for right now, we are going to practice with it a little bit just to kind of get a little bit comfortable. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my pSQL. So here we are in whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are right now in your terminal, right? Let's just go ahead and type in pSQL. If everybody had that elephant running, you can do this. If your elephant's not running, it's going to give you an error. And again, this isn't the exercise, so if it's not working right now, don't worry about it. We can fix your elephant problem later. Yes, I did say elephant problem. Yeah.
If you click on the elephant and it says open pSQL and it opens your terminal for you and you get like a little hashtag thing.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. See, yep. Get the hashtag too. That's totally cool. Absolutely. So we've got so this is basically the general syntax, or kind of like the opening look of what pSQL is, right? So if we type in help, it's going to give us some like basic commands of what we can do, right? So right now, if you do \L, you'll see I have a whole bunch of databases. This is going to list out all your databases here. For you guys, I suspect, since most of you just downloaded Postgres sometime in the last couple weeks, or a few weeks, you'll probably only see maybe like your username and maybe something that just is titled Postgres. Does that sound about right? Cool, cool. Yeah, so you'll see like these are some things, a bunch of these you guys will get into at some point as well. But yeah, so like I've got like, where is it? This is Beer Lister is my project 2 here. Mobilease is like a project that I worked on after class ended, things like that. So I just have all these databases just saved up in my Postgres, right? So that's just \L. Oh, so many. I lied. I have more. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and actually create our first database, right? So I'm just going to create WDI8. One of the big parts of SQL syntax, and I think I have it noted below this as well, so if you forget it at some point, it's in here. One of the big things is the semicolon. I will make sure that that gets a little higher. So the semicolon is very important. It won't actually run if you don't have the semicolon. It'll ask for more, right? What? So if I get rid of the semicolon, technically no, but convention says it does. And you'll see when we get into more exercises that like there are some parts that are in caps and some parts that aren't in caps. Did I actually do that? No, I didn't. All right, let's type it in again. Create database, WDI8. Cool. All right, so if you create your database, you should see something that just says create database, right? So from there, if now we list, if we do \d, this will list all of our tables or our relationships. And right now we have nothing. We haven't actually created anything. We just have an empty database. Question, you guys?
Yeah, I just got a syntax error when I create database.
You have 8 days. Yep. Cool. Yeah, and again, if don't worry too much if things aren't going according to plan right now. I will come around and help when we get into the exercise as well. So if it's not working, tilt your computer down and maybe just watch along for a second, all right? Cool. All right, and we'll go through stuff in a little bit. So again, right now we have an empty database. It says no relations found. So let's just go ahead and create our first table. So we're going to create students. So now we've created a table. So if we run \d again, now we have students. We now have a table. For now, don't worry about this sequence thing. Let's just focus on the table. So we have our students table, right? So at this point, we have our first SQL table and we can play around with it. So the first command that you'll learn is this select star. So the idea is star is essentially everything. So select all. It's essentially saying select all, right? And you'll see here, it basically just says select all from whatever table we want. We only have students table, select everything from our students table. And there's nothing there because we created our table, but it's also empty, right? So let's go ahead and insert something. So let's insert me into the students table, right? And it actually gives us an error. Does anyone know why? And I went a little bit fast over this, so I'm sorry for that. But does anyone know why? Just thinking back on when I created this table. So let's look at this create table here. Looking at kind of the error message and the table, does anyone see why maybe it would give me an error and tell me that I can't create that student? Yeah?
Because you didn't include values for like quote, birthday, and SSN?
Pretty much, except it's actually just SSN. Yeah, so basically the idea is, so it says SSN violence to not null constraint. So the idea here is you can create, or you can have constraints on each of your attributes within a table that says something like this has to be filled in, or this doesn't have to be filled in, or this has to be text, or it has to be an integer, right? So you would add constraints on that actually tell SQL what is necessary and how it needs to be inputted. So in this case, because I didn't add a social security number, it tells me that I can't actually insert that student. So let's try that again. Let's do it here. Let's insert everything.
So if it says unique, then I have to put that value in?
So if it says unique, it means that it has to be unique, basically. So it can't be the same as anything else that's in that table. Yeah. Yeah.
If you make a mistake, like putting a forward slash in front of an L,
Mm-hmm.
like, and it doesn't let you, how do you clear it or change it? Like, it's just telling me error message, there's a syntax error.
So it's not going back to the hashtag?
No, yeah, but it's like, that syntax error was in the eon ago. Like, it's like I just did that.
Oh, well, as long as you see the hashtag, then you should be fine.
No,
You should.
but it won't let me do anything. Like, it's like, it won't let me create anything or
if you hit escape,
I
maybe.
think she's looking for Control plus C.
Ah,
If you need to clear
Control C.
out whatever you've done to get back to this line again, and make sure you see a pound sign there, you just hit Control C.
Control C or plus C?
Control C.
Control C. Pretty sure that's right. I'm trying to do my fingers. Yeah. That do it?
Yeah, before there was a minus hashtag, and now there's
Yeah.
plus hashtags.
Cool.
Thanks.
We'll get to there and talk about that.
So now, if we go ahead and select star from students again, now you see my student is created, or my student's
One
here.
row, and this is the information.
Yep, exactly.
It's
So
kind of confusing because it wraps around there. Oops. It
Yep.
wraps around. And
There you
there
go.
we go. That makes it
that is my real social security number, so try not to memorize it.
easy.
Just kidding. All right, so you can then update things, right? So the other beautiful thing about a database is that you can go back in and update things, right? Which is something that you'll get into a lot when we get into Rails, is updating stuff. So let's go ahead and just update myself from Joe to Joseph. Let's make sure we all call me Joe still, though. I'm not big on Joseph, but cool. So it updates one. So let's go ahead and select all from students again. You'll see my first name has been changed to Joseph. Cool. And then lastly, we can delete. So not surprisingly, if I try to run this, right, it won't work. But, so it says delete 0, right? But if I run it here, it would work. Yep. So now I've changed the name to Joseph. So you'll see here, one of the big pieces here is this where, right? So we've got our delete from, similar to select from, right? Except you don't have to necessarily use the star here, because we're saying, we're using this where. So we're saying delete from the table students, where the first name in that table is Joseph. Let's go ahead and delete it. And now it says delete 1. So I've been deleted. I'm no longer a student. So lastly, if we select again, I'm gone. Yep. So finally, we're just going to drop this table and then delete the database. Yeah, question?
I have a question. So you use that delete from, like, let's say you did a different value other than name. Like, let's say you did, like, delete, like, last name, quote, or something. Would the other information still remain?
Nope. So if you said delete from and then where last name equals GZ or something, right? It would still delete the whole row.
The whole thing?
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually a little bit dangerous to do this sometimes, right? Because let's say there are multiple people that have their first name as Joe, right? Then you might delete all of those Joes. So something that we use here, that's why this ID is so important. So anytime you create something in your database, it's going to automatically give a unique ID to that person, right? So oftentimes you're going to be looking up stuff and actually deleting it and updating it based on the ID instead of like a first name, because the ID is the unique identifier of that one row. Yeah.
So if you were to select delete star from students, is it going to empty out your database?
It should. Yeah. Yeah. If you delete everything from students, it'll delete it all. Yeah. Exactly. Or you can do what we're about to do now and just drop the table. So this would, by doing drop table students, it'll actually remove the entire table. So now if we do \d, it goes back to no relations found. So that students table has been completely deleted, right? And then finally, let's just go ahead and drop the database, because we don't need WDI8 anymore. Dropped. So now it's drop database. So now, if we go to \L, go all the way down, you'll see there's no more WDI8 anymore. And then if you want to get out of Postgres, it's just \Q, which we're going to do right now.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Yes. Definitely be very careful when you're messing around with it. But yeah.
If you have like a really large table, would it be kind of cumbersome to do this from the terminal?
Yeah, it would be. And we're going to get into how to not do it from the terminal in the future. Today we're going to be playing in like our command line a little bit more than the terminal. Oh, that's the same thing. Today we're going to be playing in the command line. But going forward, you're going to learn how to do it not necessarily in the command line. Yeah, that's a good question. So again, like today we're just learning like the syntax of SQL just so you recognize it. So at some point you're gonna have like your server running here on this side, right? You'll have your browser up on the right side, and you'll be doing like updates and changes in your browser, and you'll see all this stuff flying by in your terminal, right? And you're gonna see a bunch of SQL statements just flying by that says update, and insert into, and delete, and things like that, right? And so this is really just to get you comfortable with just like visualizing it and seeing it. And then when we get into Rails, you're gonna be learning how to use it kind of on the browser side, and then making it affect that back end. Yeah. Cool. Are there any other questions before we go on break? I feel like it's about that time. Nothing? All right, let's take a 10-minute break, and let's be back here at 11:02, so an 11-minute break. Yeah, right? Getting crazy.
It's Friday, thanks for that.
Hey, Joe.
Hey.
You know, we set some stuff up here.
Yeah.
Only one thing, when you create a
I don't know if that affects primary
you can create a task, so every single row in that table is going to have an unsigned column. So the first name is going to be a variable change the type, and it can't be null, which means in order to create a new row, I have to have a first name. Same thing with last name. Not null. I have to have a last name for that thing to be created. If I try to create a new row in Zoom without a first name or last name, there's going to be an error that says you cannot create that. If I tried to create this SN that wasn't an integer, it would yell at me and tell me, you were supposed to give me a number, you gave me a string instead, I can't do it.
Yeah, either. Let me grab that. Sorry. Yeah. But that is most likely what the issue is.
That is the same thing that
so
they're all rated, starting from create.
which actually was like a huge mistake. I paid all this money that I didn't
And we created it and removed it, so initially we were hoping you would get an idea of what can happen with privacy. And if you want to go through it.
Yeah, I think what's probably happening is that you have something running on it already.
Right,
I think so too.
This one didn't work.
Yeah, why not?
Alright, yeah, let me grab
Yeah,
that.
so this is actually what.
Yeah. This whole time. Yeah, let's take a break for a minute.
Okay.
So
Right back.
this one it will work.
So you've already
Why
done
didn't
all this
this
stuff
work?
fairly, I mean,
No,
more like
so this is new to me because I have a personal Excel spreadsheets and then also that computer wherever this, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In this case, like not in this one. You're not like this is literally the last time
What
you're
is that?
Oh, so that one has
Raw
to be put in as well.
Right, it said there was a not null constraint, meaning I cannot save that new row until I have the first name and last name and an emerson.
Or and it's
And an all three.
it has to
And this has to be an integer and those have to be characters. And if I added those in,
yeah,
that has to be
grab that little
characters.
Wow. Wow.
So if I had put in
yeah,
this,
it's very nice.
It wouldn't be all about this.
because it needs first name, that's
Ask her
okay.
share the rest.
it's from her like
Like
looks like a night or 2 week.
saves in like what you typed in. Yeah, I don't think so.
With the
When
one.
Yeah.
I think he's got like something running on like his 5432 server already or something. I have no idea how to fix that.
The best way is to start up that start the elephant and then quit, and that will usually shift. That's what you. That's how you were using it. That can be
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm not
I'll
sure.
check and see if there's another.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's saying that like it fails to open its server. So
Alright, let me make sure that.
yeah, mine's not up. All right, I'm gonna grab this real quick then.
There's a line.
Okay. So it was a WDI database.
Yeah, that means you
Table of,
record.
But if you break the database, you would do the rest of the exercise.
So then what I can do is I can just drop this next.
Yeah, exactly. Database.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly
Oh, do I need to use,
Did anything happen yet?
Front end is more of like this like back in Rails. So yeah,
So I'm trying to think of something that will
yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I slash like applications. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it just seems like there's some things that look like full stack.
But we're gonna be doing some it's just also
It's like, yeah, so even so, like, going forward, you're still never gonna be like raw SQL. It'll still be good. It'll still be doing that's
There's a lot of information through raw SQL through different tools, even Excel and stuff.
Yeah.
Where you add, update, delete information through different sites.
Yeah.
I was talking about a lot of before writing
So
There's more of like that's what's going on. Like something that normally developers do.
There are plenty of web developers that have never seen SQL. They create applications that save from the database, read from the database, they've never seen SQL. So yeah. There's plenty that's still using it. Yeah. So I can stay awake. No, I mean, do what start to do? It started at one higher than whatever the last ID was. And it will remember that stuff, so it's pretty interesting. But the database takes care of making sure that it's used. Sorry. Hey, let's be clear. I was waiting for him.
Can you tell me if this is normal? What was the one?
Like IY?
What is this?
So that's the listing of all of your databases. It's the columns and it's the rows and column pieces of your database. So if you've got a database called IY, the owner is, I guess it's probably your username. Yeah. Okay. And then there's some other information about it. We'll see what language it is. You have a database called Postgres, which is really, it's kind of funny. Postgres database pulls information about all the other databases that are in your database.
So everybody's
Yep, I'm pretty sure he showed it. Yeah, so he's just got more. The same idea right up here. Joe just has a lot more.
This looks different than mine.
I think it's still the same type. Access privileges, owner, encoding, collate. Did you not have access privileges, maybe? But he just needs to extend his out. See, it wraps around is the problem. As your screen gets shorter, it wraps. There, now it looks closer to what yours was. As soon as you do this, all of a sudden that row, it tries to show all of it, so it pushes it down. I lost it now. Where did it go? There it is.
Hack my computer.
I was showing the listing of databases, and she was wondering why hers looked different.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't. It does, but it doesn't.
Yeah. I just have a couple extra, I suspect. Oh, Matt, could you run through this? How was that yoga class yesterday? I'm really sad that I missed it. Who did that?
It was really fun.
Yeah? Oh man, I need to switch to yoga. Yeah. I'm so inflexible. It's really bad.
Did everything on the chair.
Yeah,
On the chair?
Yeah.
That's just my kind of thing. I like chairs and I need to stretch. What's up?
Put some other thing on that.
Well, at least it's Friday, right? So you get to relax the next couple days.
Probably another instance of Postgres.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Postgres running. I bet it's probably in one room.
And again, it's like some of that.
You do have those right. So you can do one of two things. You can either simply use this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the SQL Databases. Even that is required. What I think we should probably do, since you're in this strange state where you have
So your product is not
you have data, I'm gonna go through.
That I would use in Postgres prior.
Yeah.
No, it was just because I did the data analytics course. And so the data that I would use would have been. I don't know if I did. It's a ways off for the.
That is a ways off. Yeah, deeper.
Lessons.
Right. Today's just raw SQL. Right.
Trying to like modify the database to
building it all
SQL with Amazon Web Services. So maybe that piece.
Yep.
Alright, so it's okay if I just remove all of that?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. So the products are doing 39.
Actually, I can leave that data there.
But if you need to get rid of, like, you can just do
Let's just say like you wanted to like have 1,000 like investment options. You want to, choose 3. And like when it's like first to run, things like that, and then your targets based off let's say strategy. Let's say you have like 1,000 companies.
Sure.
And
That's cool. Yeah, we can talk later if you want. Yeah. All right. Let's bring it back together. Before we jump into the next part, I just want to like bring it back to the room for a second and see if you guys have any questions of what we've covered so far. I know it's going pretty fast, and it's kind of designed that way because again, like the raw SQL code is stuff that you just want to learn to understand, but you're not gonna have to write it on your own. And really, it's similar to like all the code that we've done so far. Really, if you need it, you can Google it too, right? So I just want to bring it back to the room and see how you guys feel. Any questions before we keep going? No? Alright, cool. Sounds good. So let's talk about our schemas, right? So a schema, I'm going to pull this back out. So as I showed before, like with our artists and songs example, right? We have multiple tables in a given database, right? And so each table is defined by what we call a schema. And when we created that, like the WI students table, that example is our schema, right? So basically saying what columns we want to have in that table, what the table is called, and then within those columns, what kind of data are we putting in there? So like text, integer, Boolean, anything like that, right? So schemas are where we were going to put in any of the constraints as well. So like you saw the is not null thing for the social security number, right? So it's basically a way of doing it. We're going to create like a SQL file that we can load into pSQL instead of having to write it one at a time in like our terminal to actually create each table. You guys will get way more into schemas when we get into Rails and that sort of thing. But essentially the idea is a schema is the sort of basic picture of each table, right? Does that make sense? So within your schema, you can put in all kinds of things, as you saw before. So we've got our Booleans, we've got integers, we've got floats, text. So you saw before when we were creating that student, there was text and there was varchar. Those are, for purposes of what we're going through right now, they're the same thing. Varchar is essentially like a shortened version of text. Text allows you to put in literally more information if you have like an entire book that you're putting into there. I would suggest not doing that though, because typically you don't want to put a whole book into one database cell. But for these purposes, just think of varchar and text as being the same thing. You can also say like date and time. So you can specify that you're using dates in a certain database cell. So it will actually create like, you know, your typical, like, whatever today's date is, 3/4/2016 or whatever today is. And then again, we have our constraints. So we've got null, is not null, and unique. And if you guys want to look into what else there are, we have links to some resources here. Not a huge thing to worry about right now. But the idea of constraints is really that it's something that you need to have. So you'll see if you're filling out like a sign-up form or something, right? And it requires your first name. You've got like a little red star next to it, and it requires your last name. That's literally what they're saying here. So they're saying first name is not null, right? And last name is not null. But your phone number is optional. So they didn't actually put a constraint on that. All right? Does that make sense? Cool.
I have a random question.
Yeah.
So, like, is there any way like a constraint can be created upon certain thing happening?
So can you give me an example?
So, like, let's say, like, if you know 5 names are put into the database, then a new constraint is created called X.
It's a good question. I don't really know. I've never tried it. I'm not sure where that situation would come up necessarily, just because, like, yeah, I don't know. I'd look into it. I don't know off the top of my head. You could do it. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. That's the best I got.
Up a little there, I think, but depending on which database you're working with is going to have all different powers and abilities that you can do, but mostly you're thinking about a single row at a time. You're having constraints on how that row can be added to that table, and you don't think about across tables other than unique. It has to be unique among all the rows that are in the table. So almost all the time you're thinking about a single row.
Yep. Cool. All right, so we're going to get into an example that you guys will be working with for pretty much the rest of this class. Kind of thinking back to this library example. Obviously, we got pretty down into it here on all of these, right? We're going to keep it at a very high level. So we're going to think of just a library is kind of our database, and a library has books and it has authors. It's simple as that, right? So we're going to create the schema for that, or we have a schema for that. And you guys are going to kind of go and play around with it for the next probably half an hour or so. So I will Slack this out, but there is a link in the lesson plan as well. Where am I? Copy. All right. So go ahead and open that up, and you can just clone it down. You don't have to fork it if you don't want. We're not like there's no like deliverable at the end of this. So there's a udo here, but I just want to kind of pull it up real quick and just show it to you guys. So you guys are going to go through and like create your library. So whenever you actually cd into the folder when you clone it down, you're going to go ahead and create your library database, and you'll be playing around in SQL from there, right? And there's a step-by-step instruction on how to load in your seed file, how to load in your schema. So let's just pull up the schema real quick. So this looks pretty much exactly like what we put into our raw pSQL command line, right? Except before we had students. So here we have create table, authors, ID, all of this stuff, right? But what this allows you to do is allows you to be a little bit more flexible, right? So oftentimes, bigger, all right? Cool. Second, yeah, Adrian.
Sorry, just a tab lost. Where are you?
Yeah, so in the SQL Basics lesson plan, there's a library SQL. Actually, there's a link for schema file. Cool. Yeah, so this is essentially like creating your 2 tables, your authors table and your books table. You'll see here in this schema, we're actually dropping the tables first, right? So it's saying if those tables exist, get rid of them and let's start fresh, right? Oftentimes you're not going to want to do that because you don't want to just drop your data, right? That's something that's dangerous, and that'll kind of come along later on. But for now, since we're just using this as an example, every time you run this schema, whatever you had in that database originally, it's going to get dropped, and it's going to create 2 new tables. So the nice thing about this is that you can just go into your schema here. Let's say you wanted to add something like nickname to authors, right? You could just add that in as a line here, and when you run your schema file, there will be a new column titled nickname. So that makes it a lot easier instead of having to go into your P-SQL, find that table, and then drop the table and update it from there. You can just do it straight from this file. So similarly, if you go back, you'll also see a file in the library exercise called seeds. So you'll hear this term a lot when we come up into like the Rails portion of this unit is a seed file or seed data, right? Basically what that is it's sample data, right? So when you guys build like your project 2, you're going to build an app that has like a database on the back end, and you're going to be playing around, you're going to be adding things to that database, you're going to be updating things and deleting things. But a lot of times, just to make sure it works, you want to start off with like a little bit of sample data that you can first mess around with to make sure that that database is actually working, right? So this is what we call seed data, literally planting the seed of data into your app, right? So here we have just like a bunch of, again, raw SQL statements. Insert into authors, insert into books. When you get into kind of the Rails part of this, it's going to look a little bit different, but the idea of it is the same. It's just sending data into your database, just as like as example. And this is why when we run that schema file, it drops the tables every time as well. So we're going to seed the database, and we're going to make some updates to it in the next couple exercises. And if you want to do it again later, if you want to like start over, you just run that schema file, and it will drop everything that you changed and redo it for you. Is that cool with everyone?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you weren't dropping the tables before you did like that create,
Yep.
let's say you didn't have something there already, like you would override.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so if you have data in there already and you don't drop those tables, if you run like the seed file again, it'll just add all that stuff to the bottom, right? So if you already have 10 authors in your authors table, and then you run this seed file, it'll add however many, I think there are 8 of them in the seed file, it'll add all 8 of those authors underneath the first 10 that you had there. So it won't clear it out. And again, like later on, you know, we'll get into this discussion about dropping your tables and dropping your databases, right? Because there comes a point where you don't want to do that, right? So think about Facebook. If they delete their tables every time they want to update like a new column in their database, that'd be a disaster. They'd be deleting all of our data every time, right? We don't actually want that to happen. So going into like thinking about it in like a production sense, once you're like working in a real development world, oftentimes you're not going to want to drop your table or drop your database. But for these purposes, this is just like a really simple example, so you can just keep kind of playing around with it. Cool. So yeah, I'm going to let you guys kind of play around for a bit now. So for the next 10 minutes or so, just kind of follow this lesson plan. It's really a step-by-step of creating your database, loading in your schema, loading in your seed file, and then just performing what we call CRUD actions. Does anyone know what CRUD stands for? Matt?
Create, read, new, delete.
Close. You got 3 of them right. Anyone know what the U stands for? Yeah. Yeah, update, exactly. Yep. So, yeah. Question? Alexa?
Oh, no, I didn't know. You didn't answer that. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you're going to hear the term CRUD a lot. We're going to build like a bunch of different CRUD applications while we're doing our Rails apps just because as practice and stuff. So learning how to create things, learning how to delete things, learning how to read, and learning how to update. That was out of order, but that's all right. Yeah, so you guys are going to learn a lot about that. So this is just like really basic practice and introduction into it. So you'll see there's insert, select, update, and delete, right? So select being in place of read. Yeah, so for the next 10 minutes, just go through this, try to play around with it a little bit. And then after that, we have kind of like an even more in-depth exercise. So if you finish this up early, you can jump into it. It's also in your library exercise. So if you pull up libraries, you'll see there are these 2 SQL files. So for this one, you're going to go into basic queries. And you'll see there's just a list of questions, right? So get all information about all authors. So pretty much all we're looking for is what is the SQL statement to do that. So when you jump into your P-SQL, just play around. So when you load in the schema and then load in the seed file, then just try to play around with it and try to answer these as well. But first things first, just work through these things. So it gives you step-by-step, and I'll put 10 minutes up, and let me know if you have any questions.
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
So are we cloning this in our regular terminal? We're just opening it?
Yeah. So just clone it down into like your sandbox folder, and then CD into it, and then follow the steps. Yeah.
They're pasting this ES.
Because they're two separate things, right? One is your code, and one is
I created the folder. Just the main page, but then I grabbed this.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm gonna,
That's right.
yeah, so you grab that link.
And then you copy it against this.
I didn't do that yet.
Oh, we'll try it.
Is that the next step? So I am now in library.
I think maybe I need to create a database first.
You could have set that up. You drove that out.
Literally just clone that, clone this, okay?
Oh, yeah.
So I created this and then I did the clone in that.
Joe, you have to create a database first.
Yep. So first step under the do is to create a library DB. Yep.
In the sandbox. And
Yeah,
then,
you can do it in your, you can do it wherever. So when you write create DB, it'll just put it in your PC.
So I can just do it.
Yep.
Right.
In your terminal. Yep.
I'm in the.
Yep, that's fine.
I'm in the.
That's fine. Yeah. So you can do that, and you can go out of your library at this point and like look up, and you'll still see that library database. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yep. Yeah, you need to be out of those first. Yeah. So next. So that you want to do. Yeah. So all those commands, you want to do outside of eSQL. So, so if you scroll up a little bit, did you actually go back to the lesson plan? So first thing, scroll down. Go.
How do I go back and
Follow that. Yes, you want to create your DB. Yep. So don't worry.
What's your code format today?
What's up?
What's your code format?
Yeah. So create your DB and then just follow that stuff. Yep. Exactly.
Nope. From there, create the database. Which is create DB space library. Oh, if you already did it.
You go back.
yeah, I did that here. I think that's all of this stuff is in that library. In my sandbox. I didn't create DB library. And then I cloned it.
Okay. Try the next thing.
So you just copy and paste it. You can just go, so you can type in PC. Well, so you're missing you need a semicolon. So you can do it from, so yeah, open it for SQL again. So go into
No, I actually don't know how to go.
and then just do in all caps create database. Space.
I'm working on.
You want to do database, write it all out. And then space library in lowercase. Yep, just go for that. Yep. Semicolon. Alright. So that'll be the same.
So for me, it says.
So create a database, clean schema.
It's because you included a dollar sign. So make sure you copy it.
Yeah, that's where I am. So
Yeah,
if
sorry.
you pass that, I don't know where to help you. But Joe knows.
What's up?
Okay, so you both.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
create this,
Yep.
and then set all this stuff.
Yep, that's perfect. So basically what it's saying is it drops the table and then drops the other table. So like your authored books, right? And it's saying those don't exist, so it's just going to skip that. And then it's saying you created the two tables, so now it's created authors and books. And then you loaded the C file, right? And basically what it's doing is all of these inserts are all of that information that we put in that C file. So this is giving you like the list of authors and list of books that we included in the C file. Yep, so it's just sample data that we gave to you guys to play around. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey Joe, I'm still getting paid.
Oh, you have to create it first. So if you do, so exec, so do create DB, no caps actually. No space, sorry, and no caps in that. Yep, no space, and then library, lowercase. Yep. Yeah. Cool. All right, now try running that. The other command. Yep. Cool. And then do the same thing for C.
But wasn't the answer?
No.
Like when I put it down, is that form?
So that had like a schema and a C file, then you need to load it. So you have to create a database on your own. And then this here is pSQL-D library. Well, that's loading in that schema that we're talking about. And then same with the seed setup. So if you run this command now, it'll load in all of that sample data that you can then play around with.
Okay, so we close it down.
So, yeah. Yeah, so you still have to create those tables. So those pSQL commands we're running, those need to be run outside, just very outside of the So like where it says like in the lesson plan, or yeah, there. So it's like pSQL, library, scheme SQL. That's all. You all do that in your terminal, not in pSQL. Yeah. And you need to go into where you clone that down. So wherever you clone down the library exercise, you just need to go into that folder.
So how do you get from your library state to this? Like it's not a list option of all of these. Did you do that yet?
Yeah.
Alright.
That's the next part.
I'll wait till you get there.
I'm ready to use it. String. Oh, yeah. So you create a tree. That's fine. Let's go back.
Okay,
Yeah. Now you want to run. Now you want to call
the
this.
stuff that's on the do you
Ignore that.
first or
This
do
is
the
the
stuff
same.
that's on the routine first? Is it
Yeah.
like
So
two
run
different
like
things?
this command. And you want to do this. So like that's right. Yeah. You want to do that.
So you'll be to change the directory or just?
Yeah, so start there. Okay, so it's created that, so that,
That was just another link.
cause I was like, okay, on that, and then something else was gonna be. Oh, you did. So it's also confusing, like, if I do terminal or I need to create the CD.
Okay. I think it's a quote.
I need a CD.
Yeah. Yeah.
To repeat it? Well, I could. Right, I did another one. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool, thank you.
Gotcha. You do that greater than.
Oh, no, you can use, okay.
Yep. right, so obviously time's up. People are kind of just getting started, which is totally cool. The next thing we're doing, is going into like the actual basic queries exercise. I have 20 minutes set up for that. So if you are running through all this like insert and select stuff, take your time, not a big deal. And then we'll get into this exercise whenever you can. So I'll just put another 20 minutes up. Let me know if you have questions as you're going through kind of the first part before we get into the basic queries. And if not, then feel free to play around with it. We're running pretty well on time, so if we need extra time, we can put some more on the board. Does that sound good? Cool. 12:30. 1 sec, sorry.
So are you doing Wednesdays now? So for
No, so this is on your.
But I can't figure out the
So
operating.
this is the database one that's saved.
so the way I stated?
Get all information about all authors. So I've tried like select.
Not right now. So this is all from unless someone hacked into your computer,
Star
they
authors.
can't search the database.
Yes, I tried, but I
So
was
everybody has a
authors
separate
have to be
library.
lowercase.
So what I'm trying to do, so you're trying to get the information about the authors. So yes, what star?
Yeah, so regular Portland would be sort of.
Yeah, there's authors lowercase.
Yes, right. So these servers were like literally in the
Are you putting the thing in?
those out somewhere. And
Mine gets
everybody's in the same
I tried
place, basically next to that same server. Or if you're like Facebook, you have like 17,000 warehouses because they have so much.
That was the first thing I did, so then I tried to rewrite it. You tried. Is that yours?
And then just be careful with that.
You tried to
I know it's still
do a different library?
Yeah. It's just like.
That's what I first did.
Oh.
I mean, mine actually is only. So, you are.
There, yeah. So it's the select and caps. Star and caps from.
Yeah, you just need your.
What's the?
For the library links. So just add, like literally put in the sentence.
Yeah, I thought that's what I was doing before.
Actually,
They gave you all the.
But I guess all of mine,
in the
you might not have names in there. I don't have anything that's not, okay, so it's like nothing to do.
Alright, now.
Did you delete them all?
I got it. We're gonna do some letters there, so it's cut out. But then I.
So what are you trying to do? So you're creating your own.
I mean, I haven't copied in. So maybe I was working with this different.
Yeah, so you need to just run these in your Okay.
I've only done this page, so was there another one I?
So like when I first started it up, all those names were already in there, so maybe
Because there's separate, right? You got databases, the SQL manager for database.
We're gonna do it like that.
Can you
Even though I moved around in this, like I can't just like list.
Matt, can you help them out? There's no like they can't find them.
That's why we're just putting the same, right?
Yeah, you
I would love to, but,
Well, yes. So right now you're selecting all, right? But the publication it's good for you. So I can see from books.
Oh, that's right. How's it going?
in like a month.
Not like the SQL.
I have a problem.
I picked up
Okay,
really
I have an answer.
bad.
I think I just started the library, like created this,
Mhm.
and then I just followed these steps.
Okay.
So now I'm going to read it and get all the information,
Cool.
and I literally have one
Yeah.
that I
So
just
let's do \2,
You can change something.
and then can you go back to the lesson plan instead of the exercise,
WDI.
and just scroll up a little.
Wherever your WDI.
Go a little more, and run one more. There, run this one and that button, or these two commands, just without the dollar sign. Yeah. So this is loading in that schema, so it's loading in the tables that we talked about, and then here is loading in all that same data. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I didn't explain that to anybody else. My bad.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now,
So now,
can I
now
go
you can
this?
go into P-SQL and play around with it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
We did S.
When I'm querying something, does it need to be in quotes?
Like
Select earlier or whatever, does it need to be in quotes?
No. You're missing a sentence. Yeah, you can literally just type in something. You don't. So actually, when you see that minus sign, it's looking for more. So you don't actually want to recopy. Yeah.
I was wondering where it is because I
Oh,
didn't
birth
see
year.
it.
I
It's
think
like where
it's
it's
like a dash or something. Yeah. But yeah. So whenever you see that minus sign, it means like continuation. Yeah.
But this person's not. Adam Brady's not.
Question? Yeah, and drums.
Oh, okay. Here. Oh, so actually the.
Well, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there you go.
I just got off the wrong by one. I hate that you can't use your mouse to like do that. You first install it, right?
It's a tree. I heard errors.
You're gonna have to put semicolons on one of those, and I tried to fix it, but now it's giving me a syntax.
Now, you configure bash to enable opening post
Yeah.
session command line via
Control C.
That means we need to use here to add something into your bash
Do you mind if I
profile.
just move your scope right? Well, actually, I don't even put all charts.
Oh, yeah. All right. So then
So I'm gonna open that file in there. See what's in there. And it's not there.
yeah. So basically, you see like
I just added that
you
to
see
your bash
like this
profile.
small sign. If you see anything else, to the minus sign, it's basically waiting for that. Waiting for that semicolon or something. You can just add a semicolon right there. Or you can Command C.
Now I said,
What's the first thing? Again, by Command C, I mean Control C. That's useful. Yep. As soon as you see that minus sign, it's basically asking for continuous.
Friday. Adam Brady's in here twice.
If people are done, feel free to go on, I guess, an extended break. Or if you want to kind of keep going, there's an advanced queries stuff that's coming up. So if you want to test yourself, do that as well.
So you should back, everything should be.
So in terms of the other stuff that I was missing, a lot of times you guys all like
Yeah.
It's not saying that we can look at it.
Yeah, I'm not
like all of your policies next and it's like things like that, maybe something like I wasn't here for some.
Okay, so
Yeah,
yeah.
I wanted to do it for myself.
Let's go together then.
I did.
Where it says select all.
Let's check everything else.
Yeah.
Just gonna get
Yeah,
rid of
that's exactly what it is. So you would do like where, birth year, and yeah, exactly.
So right this thing you're gonna learn about
No,
it's a way to run a lot of things commands. If I do a dash D, I have this much different command. You can see that I can run it off as doctor, I can generate new bit files, I can do all different things. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run the install best doctor to see what is working. And I can see that it's going right down everything is meant, it's meant right now.
Yeah. I just lied to you.
That's why you can authorize it in the eyes.
Yeah, and also,
Let's try that.
yeah, and again, it's not like 100% sure. Like, it's good to get this figured out now before we get.
Something has changed.
Yeah, yeah. So the next part of the lesson is getting
It's gonna be the last one.
requirements. It's not.
So you're saying that we can use it for like,
Yeah, I think that is about it.
just rail,
I think that might have been the last thing.
taking place of like SQL
Sort of.
Yeah. So active record is what it is. It's like the production framework we use within Rails. And that's what's making all the calls to your server and to your database.
So SQL, this, like Postgres, goes in right.
Everything that I know
Postgres is your data. It's just that
is here and available.
so it changed active records.
I'm
Like
kind of surprised to hear that you think the install fest might be on the What I'm gonna do is think of next time you're doing this, I'm gonna say I'm having that Git problem.
I think I changed all
I
the.
need to know this details, I think, in order to.
That's not so good.
Oh,
You know, the type of HTML that you
so if it gets it out of PC,
Yeah, select from, you got select national,
you reinsert all the
from, is where we select from,
Great.
Just bring out the C.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to select
Yes, but
select
unfortunately,
nationality from,
Yep.
where
Say, answer.
nationality. Sorry. The select star from, there we go. Select star from,
One of those two. It's always one of those two.
where nationality equals, let's say. There you go. Sorry.
Why did they book? I don't know why they book like oh, my nationality, I don't know why I put it wrong.
Sorry.
Well, no, what I'm, that's good nationality.
Yeah, so right now you're just select birth year. I think you have yeah. So you need to like select oh, so you want like you actually want the list of years, right? So it'd be like so you still want select. You can do like select star or select like names from authors. So let's just do select star, right? So this is saying select. So that's saying select everything from authors, right? So if you do that again, and then after that, or like before the semicolon. Yeah. So here if you calculate the error.
I started over again.
Yep. And then space, and then you're gonna do first year is greater than whatever it is. Yeah. Does that make sense? So it's basically like, so the idea is that you want to do is select something. So you do like select name or select nationality from whatever table, and then after that, that's where you put all of like items. So like where birth year is, or where nationality, where birth year, and then
I mean, think about it for a second, you know, if we really need it. Did you get your?
Max, you get it working?
That's great.
Okay. Sweet.
Because I was trying to figure it out by myself, but I haven't.
But you gotta get a hold of it, you gotta go in, so you gotta do the layers, you gotta know what's that.
Yeah, so these PC commands, you still want to make sure you run them outside of PC. So it's an access and you backslash good there. So you want to CD into your library folder again. So wherever you clone down with the exercise. Yeah.
Well, you still select the old, because when you give select,
It's like listed here, select.
You still need to go into that library folder. So wherever you go.
Oh, I thought you were saying list the birth years.
Yeah. So from here, now you can run that PC library.
Publication date.
Alright, that's perfect. That's what you want to see. And then you
Yeah, like where.
that's right. And then go down and then go back into
but you don't
PC.
want that to lie. That's what I'm saying.
Yep, just type PC. And then you Yep, now it's
Yeah, you
right.
just want the very, you don't want the national.
Probably different.
That's why it's not all this stuff.
Cool. So this is sort of nice. There will be more like there's another exercise later, just like join stuff, which isn't super necessary. So if you want to keep working on this stuff too, that's totally fine. Yeah. What's up? Yep. Yeah. So this part here part, so that actually has to come after. So yeah. So we're gonna so the name is fine. So the name is like what you want to see, right? So you're doing from authors, so from the authors table. And then before that semicolon actually. Yeah. So you're
Because I
gonna
want to
where
know
so first you can so basically saying select new. So give me the list of names from the authors table. Then you have to add in
Sometimes.
yeah, use where or here again is greater than or equal to.
So I think it's select where.
So you just have to add a semicolon.
But I think it's select.
Actually, no. So actually,
Where national.
delete all that. Yeah. Yep. And then just nope. Nope.
Where national.
Yeah. Just put the semicolon.
It's US.
And then yeah. So basically, if you see that minus sign, that means it's
I mean, I just think so.
so basically it's pre this and then you want to add something to it. So yeah. Yep. You did it.
I got my Jesus.
Yeah, right before that minus sign. You see it? So yeah, so now if you add in the semicolon again. Yep. So
Library.
So this is like
you need quotes right.
that's what's really confusing. We got to go back.
Single candidate. What's the data?
Use the
But no, we want the office. We want all the office for the office.
that was the command.
I like and the like.
I was literally about to chime in and be like,
No, they're both in. They're both where something is similar. I think Google would be a great place to compare I like and like.
yes.
What is the difference? Why, what's different about the thing you're looking for?
Just without the balances though. So that, yeah, so that you actually want to run outside of the system. Yeah. So anytime you see this dollar sign, that means that we're doing it just from extra here.
Yes, did you?
Yeah.
Select store nationality.
So Oh, sorry, I don't remember that. So the basic SQL stuff, that's fine. Like that's just it's just a readme to be able to type in answers. Once if you already did the schema and seed stuff, then you can just practice running. So you go back to that one. So here you can like break down what you're saying. But there's also statments. So if you so get rid of that and then go into PC again. And let's go to your library. All right, guys, feel free to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back at it. And by feel free, I mean please take a break. Yeah. So now if you do select star. Yeah, so the whole point is that they're two separate tables, and there's a relationship between the two. We'll get into in a bit. But for now, it's just like work on the bit.
I saw this and I was like, oh god.
Sometimes I think that it'll give me like, oh, the error is right, so I'll have to retype it in, but
Yeah. So.
yeah, it's supposed to be right. That's the best part. Not making it so ambiguous. Yeah, I like it so much.
Yeah, just go to that library, go to this one. And then go up. Click into basic queries. And basically just like try to answer it. You don't have to actually type anything in here. So it's saying like get all in front without just go back to your PC and try to
I have no idea. Points are magical I try to organize them and like have like sort of organization, but like seriously, just nothing helps because there's only so long before you get a phone. Like just do that. Like I don't know. I just literally threw all my ports in the bag with it too, and that's like I have enough time.
So yes, you have your
Yeah. Actually, your bars and words, and I was like, it's all like headphones. I'm like, they're all taken together. Here you go.
Yes, that's fine. You did all this part. So there's just another
let's say I turn off my computer and I need to close
that DB will still exist.
and do I just go
No, so that DB will still be there. That's the point of it. Yep. So the beauty of it is that there's no like root deleting, right?
where does it go like
Yeah. So if you go back to your PC, there you go.
There was
So if you use your backslash L, yeah, sure. Well,
but this side
this is your list of databases that you have in Postgres. So it's just this is all saved on your computer.
So we do like
so
books.
like where's the
That's me. Yeah, I'm like, wait a
Like where like in your library you find your no, so it's just so there's a Postgres app and it's saved in that Postgres app.
so
Yeah.
You can create DB library. The only reason that I say go into your library folder here is because when you run that like psql-d like seeds.sql file, it needs to know where that seeds file is, right? So when you loaded like the actual data in, I'll get you one second.
but before I get to the C file, so
You can create your database from anywhere in your file structure. You can be on your desktop and do create DB library,
so
and that library is saved anywhere.
so I clone this, right? And I thought this is where that folder, wherever I pull, I think that's where the database.
No, so that's where your schema is. But your database is like kind of in like the netherworld of your container. You can call that database wherever you want.
What's a seed?
The seed is like the collection of sample data. That's all. Yeah. So if you go back to the lesson plan. Yeah, just slow down a little bit. So like this command goes to schema and this command goes to file.
That's so like you have book one, so I do have a book.
Outside of the within your
See what
library.
my book
So it's saying look for the schema.sql file in that library folder and then look for the C file. Does that make sense? Which it looks like you already did. Yeah, so then if you go back to your library database, you can just play around and do everything.
Right, I understood that. So,
Okay.
so C file, that's the file that was on.
Yeah, so if you go in here, you can look into it and see.
Right. So really now that C file is now Postgres.
It's good to go, and you don't have to, it'll always be there, so it's
See that library and
Exactly.
magazines and genres, how do I get both the library of magazines and the genre?
What's up? Sorry.
Oh, I just have a question.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure this out, but I noticed that like.
Oh yeah, do Control C. Control.
I like to put on the book C.
Yeah. So basically, anytime you see anything other than an equal sign, usually you just want to do Control C, and we'll get back.
Like you just select,
You should be fine.
books.
Thanks, though.
You do like.
I see a lot of people taking breaks. Remember that part about taking breaks?
Yeah, I took it. I'll still lounge if you need me to.
What's up?
I took it, but I'll still.
All right, yeah, you got 4 more minutes to lounge. If you want to work, you're welcome to. Same. Just quick overview of it. And then there's like the advanced exercise that people do. We're not going to go too deep into that stuff. It's a lot. It's a big lesson plan. My feeling is like, again, it's I want to
Yeah, I think that was a great way to.
I actually took it, there was a Delta Plus in lesson plan, and it was a quote review that I stole and just put it in, like I literally copied your quote and put it into the lesson plan, right? So that's what I said, yeah. I'll try to find it. It's like, where is it? Yeah, this. We are learning this to be able to read it. We'll look stuff up when we want to write it. That was a quote. That was literally a quote from you in the Delta Plus. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna take that. Yeah, I should have copyrighted it to reference you.
It's funny. I've had a few different friends that have started and done podcasts, and years later, I'll listen to that podcast and I'll hear myself teaching me something.
Yeah,
And I must have known at one point.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. I feel like I listened to one of my lesson plans like the other day, and I was like, I've already forgotten what that was. Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Stupid brain.
Only we were robots. Soon. We'll be robots soon.
I really want teleportation to happen, so I want people to start working on that.
Teleportation? Oh, I'm so into it. I was having this conversation in my head on the walk over to work today. Because, like, I don't know if you guys remember, like, the introduction day, like, when we introduced ourselves, it was like, what's our favorite superpower? Or, like, what's superpower is it, right?
When you get a second.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay.
This is something we gotta make sure we share too.
Sure.
We did an update, you wanna update yourself, and look back at update.
Oh,
And
it was
you
just,
realize,
I didn't put the way.
but I think we should highlight that.
sure.
Like if you don't put a where on, it just doesn't.
Yeah, I'll make sure that's up there. Yeah.
No, wait,
Story
no
show?
undo key. You have to go back and, well, you get a backup, you can restore your backup. You have to go through and fix
Yeah,
it.
so you scroll down. Pretty much all the stuff you just went through. It's all
You
the
have
same
some
stuff.
information
So we
that
have a
comes
select
out,
star.
you've got only 2 from the United States.
So be following that same
Only get
syntax,
those
just
back.
answering those questions.
Gotta be
Yeah,
careful.
so basically here it's saying get all information about all authors. That
That's
is
why we
literally
put in
select
safety
star
nets, like
from authors.
backup,
That's the same
things
thing.
like that, to make sure that the keys don't stay like that.
Yep.
We make sure before we hit enter, like somebody else double check.
Here it's saying just the same. So now it's select name.
When it's in production,
Name
it
and
happens.
authors.
Really, what we do first is we test it against another database. And once we know that it's all looking at the top of the database, then we take that script.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
just
we
like
run
this.
that script. There's no chance for you to.
And so you're thinking to yourself that your superpower would be.
Well, so I remember my answer was like I'd learn anything. I'd want to learn anything in a week, right? I want to be able to take a week to study and I'd learn whatever I want, be an expert in it. And I was like, maybe I'd want to be flying because flying is pretty sweet. But on my walk over, I was like, you know what? Flying would actually be kind of rough because you don't realize how cold and windy it is up there when you're flying around. Like that is rough. So then I was like, teleportation is the way to go. Because I'm not trying to get cold and frostbite when I'm flying in the air. So
But flying could be fun.
flying would be fun. But then I was thinking, like, if I want to fly, I could just teleport and free dive for a bit.
Oh my gosh.
Teleporting.
Put those wings
I'll
on.
buy a parachute. I'll be fine. Yeah.
I was on to take one.
Yeah. Oh, those squirrel suits. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Take one and he was really quiet. I was like, so what's going on? He's like, I'm just thinking to myself.
Yeah. I have a lot of those.
And I was like, that's cool.
All right, guys. Let's move on. I know that people are still working, and there will be plenty of time to keep going on it if you choose. There will be another exercise coming up in a bit. Not a huge deal if you don't get to it. It's just more practice. Again, more SQL statements, just a little bit more advanced. So we kind of touched on this stuff already, right? So this is all about relationships and joins, right? So we touched on it a little bit when I was drawing out the table here. Relationship, and when we were talking about ERDs. So the idea of a relationship is essentially how do the two tables work together within a database, right? So we talked about it with our songs and artists, where we have this artist ID here on our songs table, right? And that is what we call a foreign key. You'll hear that term a lot. It's a foreign key. And basically what it is it's an ID that is foreign to this table, not surprisingly. And so it's an ID that comes from another table. But it basically shows what that relationship is between the two tables, right? So right now, in kind of the basic queries that you guys were just practicing, all of the options were select star from authors, or select star from books where publication date was greater than 2000, right? So you're basically selecting stuff from each of those tables separately, but you weren't selecting something from the two tables together, right? So our relationships would allow you to select everything from books where the author name is Joe, right? So to do that, you would use that author ID. So you would say, instead of where the name is equal to Joe, maybe you would say where author ID equals 2, right? So if you had like, I don't know, 5 different Kanye songs here, right? And you wanted to know all of your Kanye songs, just Kanye. You'd be able to say, select all the songs where your artist ID is equal to the ID here that corresponds to Kanye, right? And that's called our relationship. So there are a bunch of different kinds of relationships, and the two that you'll be working with the most are your one-to-many and your many-to-many. And that kind of comes back to like our ERDs that we worked on before, right? So like the butt of the arrow was your one, and the tip of the arrow was your many, right? Or you can have 2 tips, which would be your many-to-many. So it's the same thing that we were talking about before. So a library has many books. A book has one library, right? A library has, a book has many genres, and a genre can have many books, right? So that's your many-to-many. Does that all make sense? So for right now, we're really going to be focusing on one-to-many. The many-to-many thing is a little bit more complicated when it comes to working within an actual database. We use what we call join tables to kind of link those two up. You guys will learn about that later. I don't actually know which class, but at some point you will learn more about join tables. For this purpose, we're going to work on one-to-many relationships. So we kind of go through here, and this is looking at sort of like our basic schema, right? These are our schemas for our authors in our books, which is the example we were just playing with, right? So if you have something like this, right, you have your authors, you have your name, nationality, birth year, it seems a little bit redundant to then have your books table, which also includes author name, author nationality, and author birth year, right? You're going to have a lot of duplicate data that you don't really need, right? So let's keep going. Same thing here. So this would be a little bit weird because you have one author who has many books, right? if you add in your book IDs, then you need to have like a column for every book ID for one author, right? Does that make sense? So you would have, what am I writing here? We're just gonna get rid of that. So you would have like your authors table, right? And an author would have like their name, ID. So if you use like a book ID column, right? So let's call it book ID. If an author had 5 books, you'd either have to have something like an array of an ID here. So you'd have like ID 1, ID 2, ID 3, right? That seems a little bit unruly. Or you'd have to have a different column for every book, which also, again, is pretty unnecessary, right? So that seems kind of crazy. So that would be like having many books with one author. So instead we have what we call our one-to-many. So we have one author, right? And that author has many books. And so there, man, I'm running out of board space here. Can people see if I write down towards the bottom here?
You can erase in my library.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
I'm just gonna draw it here. We're cool. So here.
Here.
No, thank you. I got it. Thanks. Sorry, guys. Getting deleted. All right. So here we have our authors and our books, right? And let's just say, for simple sake, we have ID, title, and then author ID. And for authors, again, we have ID, name, and then whatever, anything else, right? So can everyone see that? I know it's a little bit hard, but I'll explain it a little more. Here, all you need, assuming, again, I know there are complications, like some books might have like 6 authors or something, right? But let's assume this is a simple case, right? So here, all you need is author ID 1. And then you have another book that has author ID of 2. And you have another book which goes back to the first author, and that has author ID of 1. So you don't need to like make an array of author IDs. You don't need like multiple columns for those author IDs. So that's what we call our one-to-many. So one author can have many books. Does that make sense, everyone? Cool. So that's what we mean when we talk about relationships. And this is where we bring it all back to like our relational database. So our database will have these tables that provide a foreign key to combine the two and actually make relationships.
So when you create a table
Yep.
with authors,
Yep.
it will automatically give you an author ID?
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys looked at if you guys were like when you ran the seed file afterwards and when you do like select star from authors, you'll see there's that ID column already,
And the
right?
same with books, it will automatically give the book an ID, but then if you are entering in a book by a certain author, you have to enter in the author ID?
For now, yes. There will be a time where that won't be the case, where it will automatically grab an ID from your author, given on how you specify it.
Okay.
But for right now, yeah, we're manually putting in who the author
So
ID
we
is.
can't type in the author name, it won't automatically recognize that?
In the database, or in the books table, you mean?
Yeah.
Technically, you could, right? But what would happen if you had 2 authors with the same name, right? What if there were 2 Alexas who were writing books, right? There's no uniqueness to that. And so if you search, give me all the books where the first name is Alexa, or the first name of the author is Alexa, then it would give you 2 different authors, right? So that's why we use the ID as our foreign key. Technically, you could use whatever you want, but that ID is the most unique thing that you can have. And so we just use that to be safe, essentially. Yeah, I saw 2 different questions in the bag. Matt, did you have one?
Yeah, I was just gonna like clarify like so like the foreign key is basically the primary key of another table.
That's exactly right. Yep, exactly. And then Brendan, you had one too?
Yeah, it seems like, IDs are supposed to be unique, right? That's consistent with, like the HTML attribute. ID is supposed to be unique.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
I was just gonna.
Yep, that's exactly right. An ID similar to like our driver's licenses or like our social security numbers. Those are all like defining aspects that are unique to us, right? Same thing. That's exactly right. Yeah, for sure. Does anyone have any questions? Any other questions? No? Cool. All right. So I'm just going to run through a really quick couple examples, and then to finish up, we're going to go through kind of another exercise. So this is what we call writing SQL joins. So you'll see here, I can paste it into the console as well in a second. So basically, again, we've been working with like select ID where name is equal to J.K. Rowling, let's say. So let's go in. Do I have it open? I do not. SQL. All right. Oh no, I didn't do any of this. Uh-oh, I'm falling behind you guys. All right. Let's see if I can do all this from scratch. All right. Sorry, I'm just going to copy this. It's a lot faster. Cool. And sorry, guys. All right. All right, here we go, finally. So we've been working with this already, right? So we've got our ID from authors where the name is J.K. Rowling. So let's go ahead and select that. So it's giving me the ID of 2, right? So that's basically saying J.K. Rowling's ID is 2. Simple as that. So if we did like select star from authors, right? Oops. Everybody forgets it. You'll see here, J.K. Rowling, the ID is equal to 2, right? So that's all we were doing there. And then we can do something similar. You can say select star from books where author ID equals 2. So this is saying give me all the books where the author name or where the author ID is 2 or where it's J.K. Rowling. So that'll give me all the Harry Potters. And casual vacancy? Oh, cool. Nice. Good to know. Haven't read it yet apparently. Oh, dude, you gotta read some Harry Potter. No, I'm just kidding. I'm messing. The Philosopher's Stone is the British like version of Sorcerer's Stone. Yeah. I'm just messing with you. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Cool. Yeah. So, what happens here where I do select star from books, join authors on books.authorid? This is a little bit crazy. So this is where we're joining the 2 tables together. So let's see what happens here. It gives us everything. So this is joining, wow. I'm going to make this a little smaller. There we go. Question, yeah.
Does it join the tables like permanently or just for a view?
Nope. So it's basically making like a separate table, right? So it's making what we call a join table. So it's not combining the 2 like physically at all. It's just saying this is a table that has all the information that we want, or all the information together, right? Not just so that we want it that way. Yeah, Craig?
How would we call the new table?
So it's not actually creating a new table that you've saved in your database. This is why you're using this like joining here. So it's saying join the 2 databases together, or 2 tables together, and pull something out of it just so I can see it, right? So let's get into an example. Do you have a question, or do you have an answer? No? Cool. So let's go here. So this is saying, basically, give me all the information possible about the books and authors where the author's nationality is American, right? So, oh boy. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And it's going to give me 26 rows. So this is all of our American authors, right? It gives me their book titles, publication name. But you'll see here, right? You got this author ID here and this ID table, right? So this is kind of combining. You'll see it's got 2 different IDs plus our book ID, right? So it's literally combining the 2 tables together, which we don't necessarily want, but it could be useful if you're trying to get like, if you have someone like quiet their Slack maybe. I don't know where that's coming from. Oh, that's mine. Whoops. I was like, who's doing that? What is this? I don't know how to turn that off. It's coming from like the projector. No, it won't. It won't work. Let me. All right, we're gonna do that real quick. Yeah, guys, who's making all their noise and stuff? That's crazy. Jeez, that's a good call. That's a much better call. Thank you, whoever said that. Yeah, all right, we're good. I'm not yelling at anybody other than myself. We're good. That happened to me last class too, and I fell for it. Yeah, this is the second time that's happened. Woo! All right, moving on. Here we go.
It's Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday, right? All right, cool. All right, so on that note, so this allows us to like select information about the authors based on the information from the books that we have in that table, right? So again, before you guys were just selecting, give me the book title based on the publication date, right? But now you can give me the book title based on the author name. You can say where like the author name is equal to J.K. Rowling or something like that. So on that note, there's a whole nother set of exercises that you guys can run through. I like that. That's a good sound. Yeah, so back in that library SQL folder, you'll see there's an advanced SQL exercises. If you guys want to jump into that, you can work on these join statements. These are a little bit more complicated, so I'll be around to help out, or if you want to like Google stuff, that would be useful too. But it's going to be similar. The syntax is going to be very similar to what you see here. So you're going to see like select star from books, and then it's joining. So most of what you're going to see here is it's joining authors, right? So it's joining the books table and the authors table on the author ID that's in that books table already with the author's ID that is in the authors table. Does that make sense, everyone? So if you cut it off right there, right? If you had this top selection, that's what joined the two together completely. And you had the full table that had book title, book ID, publication date, author ID, regular author ID, author name, nationality, and so on, right? Question?
In terms of when we use quotes, with the IDs you don't have to, so with anything that's a number you don't have to.
That's right. Yep, so integers you won't need to use quotes, but strings you would. Yeah. Yep. Ask a question.
I mean, so this all sounds pretty, straightforward. But then, because we're pulling from the seed.sql database, but will we eventually get into like how you create the seed SQL?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not today, but so again, like this is all SQL code, right? So like that, if you look in the SQL or in the seed file, you'll see like insert into books. You'll literally see the same commands that we're writing out on the screen, right? So going forward, when we get into Rails and stuff, and we're creating seed files, it won't look exactly the same, which is why we're not like going too deep in the seed files right now. But yes, long story short, you will learn how to make seed files and use them. Absolutely. Yeah, good question. One more note that I forgot to mention. I saw a few people when they were doing like updates and deletes. They were doing like update star from authors or something like that. So if you do that, it'll update everything. So you need to make sure you include this where. Where is really important. Where is saying like, what is the one thing you want to update? So like where first name equals Joe, or where nationality equals United States. Update everybody there. Update it to USA or something like that, right? Just as a quick note. So yeah, does anyone have any questions on this join statement? So you guys are gonna dive into it in this exercise now. Again, don't feel like you need to get through all of them. It's not something that you're gonna be using. Really, you're not going to be using this specific kind of syntax after this class. But again, it's something that you want to just get comfortable with because you will see it printed out a lot. Yeah?
So is this the whole thing is similar with like ISBN number kind of things in the books?
Yeah. So basically like an ISBN number in like a library or something for each book is like a unique identifier, right? So your IDs are the same thing. Your IDs are just unique identifiers on those, on like your books, your authors. Yeah. Yeah.
In that case, is there a difference between if we were to say books join authors versus authors join books?
Technically, not really. In this example, no. Basically, it'll just show like whichever one you put first will show up first in that table that prints out.
Okay. In that case, though, would you then do like authors.id? Like, would you switch the way you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. You want to switch author's ID equals books.author's ID. Yep, exactly. Yep. You guys might notice like this books.author ID and authors.id looks pretty similar to how you're calling something from like an object or something like that, right? So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's pretty similar syntax in that case. So like using your table and calling a specific column. So, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna let you guys get to work on that advanced stuff. Or if you're still working on the basic one, feel free to keep working. again, like not huge pressure to get done with this. This isn't going to be homework afterwards. It's not going to be homework. So just keep working on it. Let me know if you have any questions. We have sort of another section about many-to-many relationships, which I kind of covered already. And it's not something we're going to go too in-depth on. So I'm feeling that for the rest of the class, let's just work on the exercise. Is that cool? And then I'll just answer any questions. All right, sweet. Let's go for it. Questions? Yeah. I'm gonna jump to the back real quick. So, yeah. So you can these are backslash Q. Yep. And then
One thing I have
it won't be there for everybody. Yep, exactly. Yep. Oh wait. Hey, what's up? Sorry. Yeah. So that's the beauty of it. So instead of like when you like refresh your game or something, how it all disappears, everything's saved in that database. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Can you put a space in between like China and yeah. We just Google it. Let's just Google it. Or operator. Use PC cables for it. Yeah. Check. All right, let's just search for yeah. Right. So I think that's so if you ran it with just like yeah, it works. So I was like, it didn't work the whole time. You might do like or offers out nationality. I think so. Let's try that. I think you need to put in the or as well. So like or capital. Maybe. I'm not actually sure. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, which is why going forward, like in the future when we're learning back and stuff, you're not going to need to write code like this. It does get really long. And it's really good. Yeah, we're just shoot. Yes, ish. So no, so but you have to include this part of the operator from the operator. Which is why we're kind of learning this stuff now. But if you're not going to use it, you can really cover some of it.
So when I do
Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. So running the schema. Remember in the schema file there's that like top table, those two commands at the top of it. So those actually are libraries. Yeah, go to library.
Well, it doesn't.
Yeah, so let's go into the schema here. So this is building your table. Right? First it's dropping it. Drop table didn't exist. Right? So it's dropping the table that you already had and recreating it. So then we're going to
Like, am I disconnected? Can you get, I just tried this like 8 different ways.
No, so we drop books and then it drops.
And then I like tried to get back to the library, but I just copied the straight from that, so I know there's nothing wrong where it needs to be.
Well, so basically the idea is
I tried it both ways.
so now it's created two empty tables. So before you had data in this,
Get something to show up.
now it's created two empty tables.
Copying and pasting.
Now it's C file.
I did, that was the last one I did.
C file's gonna have.
C file's gonna drop that data.
So before that, what did it have?
It had whatever data you were playing.
Is that how it would work in like a regular working environment?
So the regular working environment you don't want to be dropping your data.
doesn't.
Right? This is just deleting the data. It's
No, I
literally
think I
Right.
yeah. So this is just like we're playing around with it right now. So like this is just making
I'm
it
gonna ask them, I don't have
get
to
rid of
explain it.
restart or anything
I think
like
so.
that.
And so running that, so running this command alone is asking you to.
So you're not right now,
Yep.
you're not,
Yep, if you wanted to, you could, if you wanted to, you could go into your schema, right? Or in like in Atom.
You know what it is?
Delete these two lines.
Oh, it's running this
It's
right now.
literally running, when you run that schema command, it's running this entire thing. So it's dropping, and creating. And that's why you need to rerun the C file now, because then you can go that data. Does that make sense?
Okay, so then that's in theory.
So,
So then I'm trying to get like disconnected. I tried to do this, but it wasn't like, it was not making
Oh.
it, so then I copied that.
yeah, so you see how there's that little option there? It means that there's like in between the hashtag, right? It means that there's some kind of error. So you always want to see that equal sign. So just do a Control C. Yep, there you go. So really, anytime you see anything other than an equal sign, it means that there was an error or you're like missing a semicolon or something. So it's always best just Control C and just try to retype it.
Oh, he did do that.
That's cool.
Right here.
Yep.
Alright.
And then add.
But like, not, but I feel like they do anything though.
Pops up.
Joe, why is it telling me that United Kingdom is a land? It said there's an error though.
Oh, yeah. So this is one of kind of the annoying parts about SQL, right? Is that you need to have the left side of the operation on both parts of the operation. So it's got to be where authors nationality equals China or authors nationality equals United Kingdom.
I mean, I guess
That's one of the annoying things, which is also one of the reasons why we don't usually code across SQL. Because you'll get to avoid this later on. You have a question?
I don't know.
Get out of Postgres and then just use the C command. I think it's usually like count tidy. You need to be like stuff. So you do \Q.
Oh, winner name, you don't need to do your own.
And then you go back in your yeah, because we like to define this point.
Okay.
So I think anything after that join, once they're joined together, yeah, so let's copy that line without the dollar signs. I tried both ways and it worked.
Let's go back to, the lesson plan and just take a look at that.
I think maybe somewhere like I know you just asked me to say before, but I don't know what happened necessarily.
Let's go on. So yeah, we want to
Gotcha.
let's start from a more basic.
Okay. So yeah, let's move.
So our
working finally?
Yeah, I
Okay.
way back in the day.
Sweet.
I'm just very.
Alright. Oh, so you're working with the.
Back.
Yeah.
So I finally got this working.
Yeah, keep going down a little bit on plan. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Yeah, let's start here.
Yeah, so I did that.
Okay.
And then I don't nothing happened.
Oh, okay, I see. So you want to do create, so anything with, if any of our lesson plans, which I didn't really specify, I'm sorry, any of our lesson plans, if you see code that starts with a $sign, that means do it in like in your terminal, not like.
Not in the.
Yeah, so if you do \q,
Let's say.
yeah, so just do \q. And then cd into like the library folder that you found down.
I mean, I have the other thing open.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, just do it here.
Oh.
Yeah, so now you want to like create DB.
When do I switch into the SQL terminal?
Yeah, so it's actually, if you go back to lesson plan, scroll down a little. You run those commands also in the terminal, and then that's where you're going. Yep. Cool.
I think I should do it.
Cool. Yep. Yep. Oh, 2 books. Yeah. I think you can do like values and that, and then you put as well, like capital thing, and then put in like other values before the semicolon. Yeah, try do like space. So right after that parenthesis, yeah, use space and.
Oh, and then I did it.
Parentheses. I make no promises, but maybe. Alright, I'm gonna leave it typed out there. Let me know if it works.
No,
Here
it's
it
the
is.
same.
I think it should. I feel like 55%. That's not super fast.
You do not able to
Yeah, I guess.
You guys want to start wrapping up? It's almost time for lunch. So here's free lunch. Yay. That's the spirit.